Mr. Onoja raised questions as to why cases are failing. He's pointing out cases failing in the courts. Can you tell us why they are failing?
Well, you cannot cite one or two isolated incidents and then, examples, for example, and then use it for generalization. In philosophy, remember, they say that there's one kind of argument, they call it, one type of fallacy. Let me tell you that criminal prosecution is geared towards achieving two objectives. One is conviction, and two, restitution or recoveries. I am sure that you know that the recoveries you are reading is not media trial, it's real, because I prosecute for the EFCC. So these people who are returning houses, returning cash, returning billions of naira, is this make-believe? The figures are there. You have the Freedom of Information Act. You apply, you'll be given the figures.
Yeah, but even the...
Can I finish?
Yes, you may finish.
The figures. These are real recoveries going on. These monies were stolen under a government that ruled this country.
Let me quickly pop in a question on recoveries, because only recently we saw the Minister of Finance write to the EFCC to kindly help reconcile figures, because it would seem that what the ministry had and what the EFCC was declaring were not quite tallying. And then only recently, too, the EFCC chair, acting chairman, we should say, which is another controversial matter happening under this government, was at the Senate. And the senators wanted to know just how much he had been able to recover. And he said, oh, I didn't quite have the figures with me. So it's very, very...
There's no problem about that. We're talking about reconciling figures. What's the problem?
Because
there are no recoveries.
The point is that some people are saying that the figures that the EFCC seems to be declaring are fantastic figures.
No. You don't understand what he said. What the minister is saying that, look, at times what you have, you may not have passed over all the information to us. So please pass all the information to us. Let us know, exactly what you have on your end there and what we have on our end here. There's no problem about that. It's about reconciling figures. The houses, let me tell you this. There are court orders, interim court orders on forfeiture. One involving a property worth 37 billion naira on Banana Island, Lagos. They made an order, the court made an order, interim forfeiture, because at times we don't trace any names to this property, or there are companies that you don't trace people. There are fake people who own these companies, and at times they acquire these properties. People you cannot trace. And then the court said, look, anybody who owns this property, please come forward. If not, we are going to make an order of final forfeiture. And they advertise this order for 1 month. Nobody comes forward. It can only happen in Nigeria. And it happened under a regime, under a government in Nigeria. That is when those kind of monies were stolen. That people could not, 37 billion naira. And you are telling me that is what? That is fair?
Can I say
you are So, and then listen again, on prosecution, you don't forget that the Administration of Criminal Justice Act only came to life less than 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
And it was the former president who signed it into law.
But did not implement it.
But he signed it into law.
Oh, yes, I agree. But did not implement it. Now, this government began to implement it. These trials you are talking about, most of them are at an advanced stage. So you cannot compare. I'm not here to compare, really. But we are talking about 16 years because of the problem of the Administration of Criminal Justice. I was a prosecutor. The only one that, that we achieved in record time was the case of Bode George I did, that we convicted at the High Court, convicted at the Court of Appeal, and, we lost at the Supreme Court. I led the prosecution in that case. So, for 16 years, we went back and forth from High Court to Supreme Court because of certain problems with the Administration of Criminal Justice, especially at, interlocutory appeals. That allowed the lower court to stay proceedings. But now they have removed that. So most of these cases you are talking about now, they are at an advanced stage. They've gone out. So you cannot begin to complain really in less than 2 years or plus. You really cannot begin to complain. And then in most cases, let me just conclude this. Your verdict on whether the prosecution was right or wrong, I'm not going to indict any judge or the judiciary, no. I mean, they're doing very well in most cases, but your verdict cannot be complete until the Supreme Court decides, because these cases are going on appeal.
Very quickly, right, with respect to these, the non-declaration of the figures, names, there's a judgment of Justice Shagari, I think it's Justice Hadiza Shagari, that was given in July 2017, ordering the EFCC to publish, release the names of people from whom monies had been recovered and the amount that had been recovered from these people. That order has never been complied with. 1. 2, like you rightly said, the Minister of Finance came out to say that there's a disparity between what we have seen and what you have publicized in the media. At the same time, at about that same time, there was a letter that came that was posted on social media that said that the EFCC had mixed up its recovery accounts with its operational accounts. And so monies, the necessary implication of that is that monies that had been recovered were being spent. Now, if you go and listen to one of the criticisms that was given from the Egmont Group and you tie it to the 9th February 2018 letter, in which the Minister of Finance said that there's a disparity between the figures that you are publishing and the figures that we have, you reach a conclusion. The Egmont Group said one of its problems was that the EFCC continually conducted media trials. You see, if you read a reading of all these things together, we'll see you reach a conclusion, like you said, that these figures are fantastic. 1. 2, and I'll also say this. There was no, I'm not picking 1 or 2 cases to generalize. I can call quite a number of cases. I can call God's Dorube.
Some of them which have gone on to appeal, but let's take Aturi's question.
Senior advocate, looking at the entire kind of criminal justice value chain now, you've talked about some of the issues that are there. Now, I want to ask you very specifically about, political interference in the judicial process, because we have seen in the past where cases were actively deconstructed into a nullity, essentially. In your view, now you've been prosecuting some of these cases, you really emphasized on asset recovery and look at what has happened in terms of asset recovery. And you've said this thing about, that the cases are at an advanced stage. The question that Nigerians, especially ones that are really, really anticipating justice to be done, when does that advanced stage conclude? Because that's what you often hear. We've actually heard that since probably 1999. This case is at an advanced stage, and then we find that somebody has been let go. What evidence or what proof can kind of give Nigerians to show that, look, this is actually happening?
That the cases are at advanced
stage? Yes, that there's political will to actually drive these cases to a conclusion.
Well, it's not about political will, it's about the legal process. Go and see, if you need to get statistics of these cases in court now, most of them after the Administration of Criminal Justice Act came into effect, they moved with better speed than cases before.
Okay, let me be precise, just to help you out a little bit. What I'm referring to when I say political will, I'm talking about EFCC, evidence brought by the EFCC, for example, witnesses brought by the EFCC, for example, suddenly developing amnesia or suddenly not coming to court. Some of these things that happen have to do with the EFCC's willingness to go all the way.
No, those cases you are mentioning now, without mentioning names, where witnesses could not be traced again, those were actually the casualties of the old order. It's not really the old administration now. I'm talking of the old criminal justice order. But it happened under the old government, where those cases, like I said, without mentioning names, some of them had been filed since 2007, for 10, 11 years now. Now, what happened was that the state proceedings and interlocutory appeals went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, go back and face your trial. In fact, I got one judgment last week. I won a case at the Supreme Court just last week. I won't mention the name again, where I filed that charge. We filed that charge in 2007. But it was only last year because they state proceedings and they went all the way to the Supreme Court on interlocutory appeals. And the Supreme Court just told us last week and said, go back to trial. Now, in going back to trial, after 10 years, some of these witnesses, you can no longer trace them. This is the problem of delay in administration of justice. So that's not the fault of the EFCC. It's not the fault of the judiciary. It's just the fault of the administration of criminal justice system that was in place before. where if you delay so much, the witnesses would lose the steam and the willingness to come and testify for you. Many of them would get across to the accused person. The accused person will sponsor them for one treatment abroad or the other, sponsor their children, and influence them, because this is a society where we can reach each other. And all of a sudden, your witnesses will be unwilling to testify for you. It happened to me too in one of my major cases too. After 8 or 9 years, the witness was unwilling to come to court. And in some cases, they come to court, they change their evidence, and they now begin to testify against you. So those cases you are mentioned were not cases instituted by this government, by this regime. No, they were old cases that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, in terms of the willingness and the political will to fight corruption, let me tell you this from an insider's point of view, that this EFCC, this led by the acting chairman Mago, has been the luckiest in the history of Nigeria. I can tell you that. Because the political will to fight corruption lies in the president giving a free hand to the commission to do its work. Before, and I said, I'm not saying this alone. Farida Waziri granted an interview 3-4 months ago where she said, that is no less a person than the chairman, former chairman of EFCC, that every day she was getting called from the villa, drop that investigation, drop that investigation. I'm not saying that. A chairman of EFCC said so.